All right, everybody. Well, welcome to this information session on the online PhD in higher education and workforce development. I'm excited that you're here. The plan for today is I'm going to introduce myself, give a bit of an overview of the program, talk to you about some of the key characteristics of the program so you kind of have a sense of how the whole thing works. And then I'm here to answer questions. And if there's anything that I don't address that you kind of want to talk about individually, at some point, I'm always happy to have a one-on-one call with you at any point as your schedule permits. So my name is Jake Gross. I am an associate professor in higher education and workforce development. I am in my 15th year at the University of Louisville, and I can honestly say I've seen this program, the higher education workforce development program, grow and change a lot in my time here. And while I think that matters for this, is that we are a very innovative, forward-looking, critically thinking group of faculty members. And I think you'll see that reflected in the program and a kind of an experience that we want you all to have as students, and also reflected in the kind of students we're hoping will apply for and potentially enroll in this program. So this is, I think this PhD program it is a PhD program, which means it's a Doctor of Philosophy. Uh, it is every bit as rigorous as any PhD program, and it is also different in that as we deliver it in what I would call an executive style. And so what do I mean by that? Well, two things. One, the type of people we're looking for to be in this program are not early career folks. So we're not looking for someone who's just out of undergraduate experiences, maybe just got their master's and only has a couple years of experience. We're looking for people who have significant experience in higher education or workforce development to come join the program. That's one way it's executive style. The second way it's executive style is in how we teach you. So the program really is structured with a busy mid-career professional in mind, and it moves through in a cohort model. So the image here that you see on the screen tries to sort of lay the overall program trajectory out in sort of one visual. And I'm going to walk through this briefly, but again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. So it is a cohort model. So everyone starts together, takes classes together, and 4 years later, we will be thrilled for you all to become doctors together. So your first year in the program, you begin in the summer. Now, across all 4 years, we have what are called residencies, and you'll see those as the red diamonds on this image here. When I say residency, what I mean is an in-person experience. And we do that every year intentionally to help build your cohort connections, but also because we know that part of what you learn in a PhD program is from those connections and experiences with peers. So your first year, you'd come to campus for 2.5 days, and you do sort of an orientation, you do some team building, but then also you'd really start to sort of get into the substance of understanding what the overall doctoral studies are about. The way our courses are structured, if you drop down to those blocks down there where you see lead and then numbers, those are all specific course numbers. The way we're structuring the classes is as what we call inquiry blocks. And all that means is that you're going to take one course at a time, um, followed by another course. And those courses are intentionally paired together. So what you do in one course will be connected deliberately to the second course. Now, I'll give you a concrete example of that. So if you look at in year one, that third square there, that would be your fall semester. LEAD 601 is our first stats class. It's your first research methods class. And LEAD 793 is a class about college students in the United States. You would take the college students class first, and in that, you're starting to ask questions. You'll pull some data sets from national data sources about college students. In that class, your work would culminate in what we're calling an inquiry brief. So you'd have a project that you'd then take into your stats class. So that's just one example of the way all the courses are structured together, but that's unique in that we're trying to be very deliberate about how the courses connect, how the knowledge is scaffolded, so meaning how it builds, but then also with the idea that if you're a busy working professional, that it is, we know from cognitive sciences, it is most productive and most helpful to you to focus on one class at a time. So In years 2 and 3 of the course, going back up to the top there, your residencies would be at this thing called ASH, which is an acronym for the Association for the Study of Higher Education. That is our main scholarly conference. So you would be expected to attend the conference with your faculty, with all of us, wherever it may be. I think 2 years out from now, we'll be in San Diego, and I forget in year 3. But you would be required to attend that conference. And then the final residency would be in year 4, when we would ask you to come back to the University of Louisville and defend your dissertation in person. The last sort of thing I'm going to talk about in terms of the structure of the program is what we call our research labs. These serve a couple of different purposes, but you will be assigned as you're coming into the program to one of our faculty, and I'll introduce the faculty here in a minute. You'll be assigned to one of the faculty members. Each of us, as part of our research and our teaching, have research labs. You will be assigned to those and broken up into smaller groups. There are already students that are in those labs, and the lab serves 2 purposes. One, it becomes sort of an advising home for you. Your lab would be where you're asking your faculty members specific questions about the program, questions about your work, but also 2, it's where you're working with one another and your peers to really start to think about your research questions and developing your work toward finishing your dissertation in year 4. So that's what the research labs are. Those persist throughout the 4 years of the program. In year 3, you would take a dedicated class tied to your research lab. I've gone over many of these program characteristics at this point, but the couple things I wanted to highlight here is, so the PhD, this PhD assumes you already have your master's degree, and then you take 48 credits of coursework, right? So all those classes I just laid out, those 48 credits of coursework. 12 credits are completed in your dissertation. So all that to say is overall, this is a 60 credit hour program. And as I mentioned, you have one course at a time. You'd be enrolled 3 semesters a year. So fall, spring, and summer. And as you'll see here in a second, in a couple slides, also each year you're producing work that builds toward and scaffolds toward completing your dissertation. So in terms of what makes this distinct from a traditional PhD and arguably some of the other executive style PhDs out there, the research lab, the inquiry blocks, and that requirement of residency are all things that we think enhance the quality and the rigor of the program, but more importantly, help you all as students and as rising professionals. So just briefly, like what are some of the things you would study here? So these are just a sampling of sort of questions that you would tackle, topics you would tackle, tied to sort of various classes. So one of the classes I teach, it's the LEAD 784. It's a class about resource management and higher ed and workforce development. We'll look at questions about how resources are allocated within institutions, including human capital, so human resources. We'll look at questions of cost. Why are costs increasing in higher ed? We'll look at questions of the economics of higher education. So it's a variety of topics. Really, from day one, a lot of what is going to drive the questions you're asking are going to be those questions that you're starting the program with. So if you're interested in a PhD program, you already have in mind, most likely, some ideas about what it is that you want to study and what it is that you want to dig more deeply into. But this is just a sort of a smattering of what the questions are that you'll be tackling and also what classes they're tied to. So I said I'd introduce our faculty. There are actually 5 of us. Dr. Taylor Pratt is not pictured here because she's a clinical faculty member and doesn't primarily have duties assigned to working with this program. But you've got Dr. Josh Wallace, Dr. Casey George, Dr. Jeff Sun. And above our photos here are just the titles of the labs that we all run and work with, and that everyone who applies to and is admitted to the program would work with and be assigned to. We've got a vast array of experiences, backgrounds, and almost all of us have administrative experience in higher education. So just a quick description of the labs. Some undercutting themes across the labs are student access and success, how policies impact those, how policies may impact students differentially. Dr. Sun, who is an attorney, looks at a lot of his work looks at the law, free speech, teaching, which is obviously a very interesting topic on college campuses right now. So again, the way this would work is that, for those that apply and are admitted, we sort of look through your research interests and then sort of match you up as best as possible with a faculty member whose own interests and own lab work overlap with yours. So I mentioned, I gave a program overview, sort of talked about the cohort model here, but some other sort of characteristics of the program is we want to be flexible, but we also know that structure and consistency can be very important for working professionals. So I talked about the residencies, you do have some requirements where you are meeting in person. Most of your coursework, however, will be completed asynchronously, meaning you will do it online in our course management, our learning management system, which is Blackboard. So that gives you the affordability or the flexibility, I should say, to be able to complete the work as needed. In every one of your courses, all of the content will be open and ready to go as soon as you start the class. Why that's important, I know my wife is finishing up her PhD right now. We've got 2 kids, busy lives. We have to plan out and know, okay, this is coming up later in the fall, so she can work ahead on things as needed. So we try to provide that flexibility. Now, there are in each of the classes, there will be 2 synchronous sessions. And when I mean synchronous, you're all going to jump on a Teams call. It'll be an hour and a half. We're going to schedule them so they're always on Tuesdays from 6 to 7:30. If you have standing conflicts with that, you would work that out with your instructor. But the idea here is that, you could sort of plan on, I know on a Tuesday from 6 to 7:30, every 3 weeks, I'm going to have a real-time call with faculty members and peers in the program. Assignments will be due Mondays at 8 Eastern when they're due. There's not always going to be an assignment due on a Monday, but we just want you to get in the rhythm. We want to make sure that as people progress through this program, you've kind of got it baked in that okay, this is due and it's going to be due on a Monday. And your research labs will be structured to meet during the intersession or when your courses are not in session. And those will also be via Teams. And when you are in a residency, whether it's here on campus or at ASH, you would also have a brief meeting with your research lab. And again, that's intended not to be sort of an additional sort of work for you. It's intended to be a home where you're talking through your ideas. You'll be working with faculty on their research. So by the time you get to that 3rd year and you're going to ASH, the expectation would be you are on a paper with your faculty member and people from your lab, and you would have the opportunity to present that as part of your professional development. And again, as I mentioned, it's one course at a time. You're walking through one course at a time. So this is just sort of fleshing out. Go back to that second slide that I showed there with the figure of the overview. This is putting titles of classes to the course numbers. This is how you would move through the program lockstep. Because this is an executive program, the way it will work too is as part of the program fees that you will be charged. When in the courses where there are books required, we ship you your textbooks directly. So that all you need to do really is just sort of say, okay, here are my next 2 classes, books are coming in, I'm ready to go. Now, I said earlier too that each year we're structuring this so that you're doing work in your classes that is substantively building toward the completion of your dissertation. And if you just sort of step out of the academic context for a minute, that makes a lot of sense. If you think about any big project, any big undertaking you've tackled in your life, professionally or personally, you have to do it one task at a time, and it builds over time, right? And the dissertation, a successful dissertation, is really no different. So in year 1, we're going to make sure that you're already starting to do substantive work on your review of the literature related to the research questions you think you're going to be tackling in your dissertation. Now, when I say you think, we have no expectation that anybody comes into the program with a fully fleshed out dissertation question. In fact, you probably shouldn't, because as you're taking courses, reading, learning, talking to your colleagues and peers, your questions are going to change, they're going to improve, and they'll become more narrow and refined. But we want in year one for you to start really digging into that literature review, and then also become human subject certified, which just means that you have institutional approval to do research when the time comes. Now, as you move into years 2, 3, and 4, you're going to be working more on aspects of what you would be doing in your dissertation, like a data analysis memo, comparison briefs, a pilot study, a qualitative pilot study. In this program, it is a PhD. What distinguishes a PhD from EDDs, primarily, so education doctorates, is a much stronger research emphasis. So you will have those 5 methods classes that you will have to take, 3 statistics courses and 2 qualitative research classes. Now, if you have any kind of stats or math anxiety, I know when I did my master's program, which was very stats heavy, I had a lot of anxiety. I was very math phobic. I got a C in calculus with the curve in high school. The way we do stats in this class is very much an applied way. So the way I learned stats in my PhD program was very much having to learn formulas and do hand calculations. We want you to understand concepts. We want you to understand what method you would apply given a certain set of data, a certain question. But then we're going to use stats software to run the statistical calculations and then to do the interpretation. So when I say applied, that's what I mean. But we do have those 5 research classes here. And then again, as you move through, you're going to be leading work that you'd be presenting at ASH. That work should be tied to your comprehensive exam. Your comprehensive exam is one of the last things you do in your coursework, and that's what builds into your dissertation proposal. I won't get too in the weeds on that. The takeaway here is, again, you're producing work all along the way so that when you get to fully be focused on your dissertation, you've got a lot of work done already. I talked about the residencies. Here they are again to sort of reinforce them. 1 each year. Now, when I say residency, I want someone asked me in a prior session, well, how long are these expected? I said that for the summer, it's probably 2.5 days. ASH, I think the conference runs 5 days. We don't expect you to be there 5 days. So these would be relatively short, maybe 2 to 2.5 days each. So just to give you a sense of the process for applying, you have to complete an application. I've got a QR code here at the end that'll link to that, and I will send out the link as well as these slides to everyone following the session. We need transcripts, 2 letters of recommendation. Now, the 2 big things, moving to that second image there, those 4 bullets underneath it. You would want to, the personal statement and the analysis essay are very important. They do at least 2 things for us as we're reviewing your applications. First of all, it gives us a sense of your critical thinking and your writing. And that's important to us because we want to see strong evidence of the ability to think critically and how you communicate, with the understanding that as you progress through your PhD program, all of that should be sharpened. The analysis essay is where we want to see a piece of your work where you are really sort of analytically addressing a topic, a question, a concern. Both of these, I like to say to folks, like, what I want to do, my job here is to get this information out to people, solicit interest, and if you're going to apply and you have questions about exactly what we're looking for, or you have hesitancies about what to put in either the personal statement or analysis essay, have a follow-up call with me, and I'll help walk you through some of that. I'll give you feedback on it. This isn't sort of a process where like my job is to like deny as many people as possible. Quite the opposite. I want good folks to come into the program that will help enhance the experience of other good folks in the program. So those 2 written essays are really important. In your personal statement, you're going to want to signal some sense to us as we read your applications, what it is you think you're interested in studying and what kind of questions you have. Interviews will be optional. In most cases, we don't always do an interview, but sometimes if we just feel like we're not quite getting the full sense of a candidate, then we may reach out to do an interview. We do not require GRE scores, although if you have them, you've taken the past 5 years, you're welcome to submit them. If you've already published some work, have some written work, if you want to submit any of that, you're welcome to do so, but that's not required. Now, the big question is someone who studies affordability, what does it cost? So it's $863 per credit hour. So if you do the math on that, every class is going to be it's going to be 3 credit hours. So that's going to come out to about $2,400 a class. If you're active duty military, there is a significant discount per credit hour. Each semester, there's a program fee of $500. So it's $1,500 over the course of each academic year. And what that's used for is, I already mentioned, send your books to you, but it's also used for student support. When we have our residencies, it's what enables us to provide receptions for you all, and to really sort of create experiences where you have a lot of good opportunity to network with one another. And then the residency requirements will obviously, for many of you, for most applicants, require some travel and accommodations. We like to get some information out to you ahead of time. We already have the date set for next summer for May 27 residency. So as folks are admitted, we will get you information very quickly about any residency requirements that year so that you can plan ahead. So yeah, with that, I'm gonna stop sharing here in a second. My name is Jacob Gross. There is the email. It's just hewd@louisville.edu. That's a general program email, but I monitor it. It's in my regular inbox. I look at it every day, multiple times a day. If you have any specific questions, like I said, I'm happy to um, set up an individual meeting if you want to kind of talk through your specific scenario. But yeah, we're hoping to see many of you on this call applying for Cardinal Cohort 27. I'm going to stop sharing and see what questions you have, if any. I'm looking at your questions here, Chris. Yeah, so these are good, Chris. I'm getting the sense you may be active duty. Um, but in terms of the friction points, we don't have any current active duty students in our first cohort. But that said, if you're familiar with our master's program, which you are, um, we have a large population of active duty military folks, and so we're pretty adept at working with folks through deployments or military obligations. I think what often now deployments are deployments, that's a whole different beast, as best I understand it, and you would know that better. But I think what we try and do is like for our students who are completing our masters, we really try and get things laid out for them ahead of time so they know if, like, for example, they're going to cadet summer training, that we can plan ahead with that as much as possible. Um, and we would, for the second question, we would work with you as well in terms of any sort of life happening, major event types things in terms of leave of absence. Um, if you completed your master's with us, you will notice that the courses may have similar titles, but they're all 700 level courses. As a master's student, you wouldn't have completed, I think for the most part, a 700 level course. So these courses with some of the topics may be somewhat duplicative, but these are elevated to doctoral level handling or addressing of those topics. And I can send more information out about funding opportunities. Um, Typically, GA ships, I will just note, are reserved for full-time students who are physically at the institution, which would not be this program. So this program really is designed to be entirely online. But that said, if there's specific questions about funding, I'm happy to work through that or talk through that with folks, and send you some additional information. I see a couple others potentially typing. And Chris, if I missed anything, just chime in here. Cynthia, no, not at all. We don't, in fact, almost nobody, we have very few expectations that someone would come in with teaching experience. We don't even require that you necessarily, given this is a degree in higher education and workforce development, we don't even have an expectation necessarily that you have spent your career in higher education. And I should also note this PhD is not, you could go out and be a faculty member somewhere with this PhD, but that is not who we see as sort of the um, primary audience or the primary student. Most of the people that apply and most of the people that would come through the program would be mid-level to more senior level folks in higher education or workforce development. It's a good question. So Mike asks for the analysis as say new work. No, this can be existing work. Yeah, that's entirely fine. If you've done a paper for another class that you think would fit the bill or you just want to tweak a little bit, that's entirely fine. We're really in that just looking for an example of your academic writing and your analytic ability. And I'm a big fan of if you've got something, working smarter, not harder. If you've got something that you think would fit the bill for that, go for it. Why don't I do this, Jessica? I'll send out to each one of you individually more information around specifics around the analysis essay. In fact, I think we've got a rubric. Let me run that down so I'm not so I'm speaking from and more grounded in the evidence. Yeah, I'll send
Okay.
it, Nathan. I'll just send everyone an individual email. I'll have some duplicate information in there. I'll send information about any financial aid available and I'll have more information about the program analysis in that essay.
And I thought it might just be easier to chat versus typing.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks,
I just
Mike.
I was kind of curious. So, and I hopped on a minute late. Sorry about that. But I gather this is like a new program, right? Because you said there was a first cohort that was kind of already underway. But um, what are you hearing from students so far? I'm just kind of curious if, there's anything the programs learned or things they might tweak for the next cohort to improve the experience. I know it's kind of early, but just kind of curious what the feedback might be so far.
Yeah, that's a really that's a really good question. Yeah, this is a new now. We've had a PhD program for decades. What's new about this program is the online executive style format. In fact, it's the first at the University of Louisville to do that, and it took us 5 years to get it approved, just because it was so different than what people are used to. I will say so. For what we're doing, Mike, just sort of in a systematic way during every course, every instructor is for this first cohort keeping notes, right? And we're doing debriefs to sort of see what were, as someone's, I think, as Chris said, like friction points, what worked, what didn't work for students. So given that the first cohort's just in the third class, we're still trying to collect some of that and learn more about that. A couple of things I think we've already started talking about changing for next year is one is that we've moved the residency, that orientation up into May for people toward the end of May, week before Labor Day, just because we got feedback that where we scheduled it in June was a little bit late for people and wish they had done it before they started classes. Um, Students, we've also, a positive point of feedback we've got is that students are really appreciating the cohort and the peer interaction. So what we're going to be doing is looking to build more time in at our residencies for that, but then also making sure there's a good structure for students to connect with one another without faculty. So this group suggested, and they went ahead and set up, I think it was a WhatsApp or a one of those group messaging chains. So we're going to look to try and enhance as much as possible that's peer connections as well. I don't know if that answers your question. It's a good question, one that we're thinking a lot about right now.
No, that's great because I mean, one of the things I was looking at was trying to learn a bit more about the course format, asynchronous versus synchronous, which you talked about a little bit earlier. And I was really curious about that because right now I'm in San Diego. Um,
Yeah, you're out. Yeah,
so
so you're out in California, right?
yeah, so I was wondering about the time zone difference and how synchronous they were going to be versus asynchronous. So I'm glad that you were able to talk through that a little bit. So thank you.
Yeah, and we tried to. We did have a debate around for those synchronous sessions, how to schedule them such it wasn't too late on the East Coast and too early on the West Coast. Um, so that's why we kind of arrived at that 6 p.m. because we didn't want it to be, I don't know. So yeah, we didn't want to be asking folks out in California to do this thing in the middle of the day when you're probably working, if possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense, at least in theory, with how, those are structured. And I appreciate doing one course per, 8-week session, right? Because I think when you do two, especially in an online kind of format, you can become a little bit maybe hyper focused on one, but not the other.
Yeah.
Um, so no, I think the format's great, at least from what I can tell so far.
Great. Yeah. And if you have any other questions, Mike, or want to talk to any other, for any of you all, if you have any other questions or want to talk to any other faculty or current students, let me know. I'm happy to put you in touch. You're, you're in Jamaica. Yeah, we had a class once. I had a student in Guam. I had a class where a student was in Guam, and we met synchronously in Guam and Hawaii, which created for some very tough times for them in terms of like the hours that they had to get up. But
Can I ask one more quick question that I'll pause for folks to ask other questions. I've been on a few different sessions looking at PhD programs just as a next step for my career, but I know you briefly mentioned the application materials and your statement of purpose or interest, and you mentioned that it would probably be good to mention what we might want to do as a research topic, right? Um, so a few other programs that I went to, the info sessions, they mentioned, looking at, the faculty in the program you teach there, what their research interests are, and maybe see where the alignment might be. But I was just kind of curious if you could speak broadly to two things in that regard. Like the first
mhm.
being, you know, I guess like when you start a PhD program, do you really have to know what you want to research, or is it more just like a concept that you're speaking to? And then the second part is like, since you've had different programs in the past, right? There's a long history here. How how aligned usually are the students with their research topic, given what the faculty are interested in, or is there just kind of a mix of, what folks are interested in, and the student might pick, bits and pieces of what a faculty might be able to help them with, or they can kind of do their own things. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, those are really good questions. Let me start with your last question first. And let me start with the end of the process. So I'll tell you a story. I remember I say this to my students when they defend. I remember when I walked in for my defense, I was, a bit nervous, and one of the faculty members said, hey, you don't need to be nervous. Just remember, you're the only true expert on this question in the room. And what he meant by that was that no student's research questions are going to overlap, or the research approach is going to overlap 100% with a faculty member or someone else in the room or in the program. So in that sense, there is no expectation that you are perfectly aligned with a faculty member. Now, like if you know you want to study underrepresented students in engineering or college student experiences, and you think your questions are going to lend you more toward like interviews or observations, you would probably more closely align with Dr. Casey George or Dr. Josh Wallace than you would with me. But there's no expectation there's a perfect alignment in terms of the faculty. I've at this point have advised dissertations on a lot of different topics and a lot of different methods. And as a faculty member, I come up to speed on that, and that's actually fun because then you're learning something outside your area. Now, your first question, no, I mean there's not an expectation that you have a narrowly defined question, but we want you to have a sense of like what you're interested in. Are you interested in um, how nonprofit organizations collaborate with higher ed for workforce development? Are you interested in student experiences, student success? Are you interested in the experience of underrepresented faculty? So it's sort of like a ballpark of what you think you're interested in, but there's not an expectation that you have something clearly defined. And again, I would advise against having a very clear, narrow question coming in because there's a lot you don't know at this point, right? So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it's helpful because I mean I know part of, at least I assume part of, going through the program and the coursework is then you have a concept or an idea of maybe what you want to research, but you refine the question, right?
Yeah.
But I just wasn't sure to what extent. I mean, it's only like a couple of pages, right, that you submit in the application, but I just wasn't sure how clear the admissions committee wanted you to kind of
Yeah.
have that concept developed or
If
not. That's great.
if it's helpful to Mike, here's a red flag for us when we get essays. If someone's only like clear sense of why they want to get a PhD is um they want career advancement and they just think it's the next thing to do and they've always loved education. If that's what you sort of say, then that's like, okay, well then why, like why go on to get the why get a PhD? Why not get an EDD then? So like if it's very generic like that and doesn't show like, hey, this is why I'm really thinking about getting a research doctorate, then that to us signals like, oh, this person may not be ready. And I'm not trying to be critical of that, of someone who is in that position, but part of our job is if we admit you, it's an implied contract that we think you're ready and that you will succeed.
That makes sense. Great. Appreciate it.
Mhm. Any other questions? All right. Well, if there are none, you will get an email from me follow up this afternoon. You're welcome again to set up a meeting with me if you want to talk through anything more or have questions. And then you from the university will be getting an email that should have the link with a recording of this in case you wanted to review anything. But again, don't hesitate to reach out. Hope to see many of your names and applications come across the desk and enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so
Take
much.
care.